In today's video, we're going to be taking a quick look at how we predict the meta to shape up in patch 14.21. There's a ton more changes this patch which we covered in our recent 14.21 patch preview video, so check that out if you are interested in a full breakdown. In the top lane, we've had buffs to Gangplank, Aurelia, Kayle, Malphite and Teemo, and nerfs to Camille, Gwen, Nasus, Volibear, Yone and Yorick. We've also seen some lethal tempo buffs and nerfs to Blade of the Ruined King. In the S tier, we have Aatrox, Dr. Mundo, Kennen, Malphite, Poppy, Shen, Volibear and Zac. These picks are just proving to be the most consistent across every single rank, with tanks solidifying their places and a few of the tank killers like Gwen falling off into the A tier with her nerfs. Speaking of the A tier, it's packed full of fantastic picks here, some of which are best in the hands of a one-trick pony like Riven, some of which are better at higher ranks like Aurora, and some are surprisingly performing much better than you may expect. For example, Cho'Gath and Tahm Kench. Aurelia's buffs are definitely ones to watch out for, as they are significantly buffing her Q with less mana cost, a lower cooldown, more damage, and more damage to minions too. Which means she'll be bouncing through waves easier, stacking up that passive in seconds, lifestealing all her health back, allowing her to always be ready to fight against the odds. Kayle's buffs may sound kinda average with just a small buff to her W's mana cost, but in reality she's all about scaling, so this could encourage people to max W or at least put a few more points into it to heal up and sustain through lane to farm and scale easier. Let's see how this one pans out, but for now we've moved her up from B to A. So you may have noticed we moved Malphite up to the S tier this week as well, and the reason is because he's already been performing much better than people realise, and now he's getting buffed, meaning if you do pick him in the right matchups and drafts, he's simply absolute freeload, especially before you start getting towards really high ranks. Shen is still the highest performing tank and top laner in the entire game though, with a very high win rate across every single rank. He's the only champion we have in the god tier so far, and that's because he's above 54% win rate and he's just so consistent across all elos. We're pretty surprised that he didn't get any nerfs this patch, so if you're a Shen main, keep quiet and enjoy it whilst you can. Into the jungle next step, and here we've got nerfs to Brand, Elise, Fiddlesticks, Karthus, Viego and Volibear. Talon did get buffed, but we do expect this to more affect him in the mid lane. In the jungle S tier, we have Fiddlesticks, Kha'Zix, Lilia, Nocturne, Nunu, Udyr, Viego, Volibear, Warwick and Zac. We expect Fiddle, Volley and Viego to keep their place in the S tier here despite their nerfs this patch, and we've moved Nocturne up with the buffs to lethal tempo as he's already been quite underrated for a while now. Overall though, it's a fairly similar story to that of the top lane, with the S tier filled with the most consistent picks and then a few exceptions. But the A tier is where the majority of those popular picks at higher ranks come out to play, like Graves and Lee Sin, who are extremely contested right now, and Jarvan and Kayn, who are also proving very strong across the board. Elise is going to move down from S to A with her nerfs, and Karthus stays in the A tier for the majority of ranks, despite having less of an AP ratio on his ultimate. Don't forget, if you do want to check out our high elo tier list too, then click the link in the description. So with just how crazy popular and successful Viego has been, we have kept him in the S tier. He's one of those picks that even if the early game doesn't go to plan, all it takes is one fight where he gets a few kills for him to completely take over the game. And before you know it, he'll be resetting his way through teams, cleaning up backlines in seconds. Trundle could be an interesting champion and one to watch out for this patch though, in both the jungle and the top lane. Lethal tempo's been buffed, his stats recently have already been pretty impressive, and with tanks being so heavily prioritized, why not take Trundle, press R and face mash your keyboard for some free LP. Zac is still one of those junglers you simply do not want to forget about. He has some of the strongest ganks in the game as he can dive over walls and set up tower dives super easily. He's got tons of CC and of course that passive too to help out when diving, and not only does he get very tanky very quickly, but he also deals some solid damage too. Brand has been really popular in the jungle and in various other roles for such a long time now, and the nerfs this patch to his passive damage, his mana regen and his Q's mana cost could be enough to finally bring him back down to reality. We do think that Volibear will continue to be an S tier pick for the foreseeable future despite his nerfs to his W's cooldown this patch. He's got various builds to go for, whether it's full tank, a bit of AD bruiser, or even that weird and wonderful Flickerblades build. But either way, he becomes an unkillable tanky healing monster with the ability to dive into teams, cause havoc, deal tons of damage, and soak up loads of damage at the same time. Let's get into the mid lane next then, and here we have Swain's overhaul with some interesting changes to his kit. We've also got buffs to Azir, Corki, Kiana, Aurelia and Talon, and nerfs to Aurelion Sol, Galio, Hui, Kassadin and Yone. With that being said, in the S tier we have Ahri, Anivia, Aurelion Sol, Cassiopeia, Hui, Lux, Sylas, Syndra and Vex. We have kept Hui and Asol here despite their nerfs, but we've also added in Lux and Cassiopeia from the A tier after they've shown recently they're not messing around. Swain's major changes have come to live servers this patch. His E is now much faster, his ultimate's active is now usable on repeat as long as his R1 is active, and overall these changes do look really positive. But it all comes down to how he's actually tuned. He genuinely could go either way, so we're going to place him in the A tier for now and check back when we make our first round of updates. It's going to be interesting to also see how Yasuo and Yone do this patch with the nerfs to Blade but the buffs to Lethal Tempo. Yone did get a bit of a nerf this week to his W's max HP damage, but honestly this is not going to stop him from being one of the most popular picks in the entire game, across every single rank and in both of the solo lanes. If people do build him correctly, we still feel like he'll be a great pick. And as for his brother Yasuo, as long as you're good enough to pull him off, he'll remain a solid A tier pick too. Kiana buffs are always scary because one buff too many and she'll be terrorizing Smurf queue and high elo game lobbies in no time at all, with her insane skill expression, crazy burst, absurd carry potential and ability to engage and demolish entire teams in just a few clicks. She has been struggling so far this split, as have most AD assassins though, so this patch her HP regen and W's damage have gone up. We don't think these will make her broken, but if you do main her, you probably won't be complaining about some buffs. Galio though has been very strong for quite a while now, and he's getting a pretty heavy nerf to his mana pool, reducing it from 500 to 410. Now this largely does impact his ability to build those bursty AP items that don't rely on mana, but it won't impact his tankier setups as much. Galio has been an incredible pick recently with such a heavily AP focused meta with his innate magic resist benefits, and although this specifically won't change, the lack of mana will definitely hurt him. Let's get into the bot lane next then, and for AD carries we've had buffs to Corki, Neela, Sivir and Xayah, and finally some nerfs to Kai'Sa. Despite the nerfs to Kai'Sa's passive though, we have kept her in the S tier, alongside Ashe, Jhin, Jinx, Kog'Maw and Seraphine. Corki's got quite a few buffs coming in this patch, so we could finally see him return to the bot lane, and because of this we're going to place him in the A tier. Sivir moves up from B to A with her buffs, and Xayah moves up to the A tier in high elo, but stays in the B tier here for the majority of ranks. The last few weeks have basically been a collector meta. We've seen it on Jhin, Jinx, Caitlyn, Misfortune and more, and that's kind of been the theme recently. But saying that, we have also had the obvious Kai'Sa doing Kai'Sa things, Ashe building a concoction of on-hit attack speed and AD, and Kog'Maw building the most random items on the planet and dealing tons of damage. Ezreal is still a fantastic AD carry to go for now. His win rate might not be as impressive, but if you do know how to play him perfectly, he's a great pick into any comp. Ezreal is a safe pick that you can pick into pretty much any matchup. He's got that E to keep him safe, and he's got tons of damage to fire and poke from afar. And there's very good reason why in high elo there's still Ezreal one-tricks floating about no matter what's going on in the meta, because he is and will always be one of those champions that if you can play him well enough, you can always main him no matter the meta. Jinx has risen back into a fantastic spot again recently too. You can still build her in the classic fashion with Kraken Slayer, PD and IE, or you can go straight for a collector, an opportunity, and go for a bit more of a burst focus build instead. But whichever way you do decide to build her or play her, all you'll need is a couple of resets in those big team fights late game, and you'll be dealing tons of damage running around at the speed of light and having a lot of fun at the same time. Ashe, on the other hand, is one of the less flashy AD carries you can play. You might not look quite as badass whilst you're carrying with her, but she's super consistent to play with great poke in lane, amazing scaling, fantastic kiting, and great setup CC and pick potential too with her ultimate. With the nerfs to Blade of the Ruined King, you still have plenty of options like Kraken into PD, or even static Shiv into Kraken instead. And with late game options like BT, Terminus and Wit's End, you do actually become relatively durable. So keep your distance, make sure your positioning and spacing is on point, and enjoy the LP. Finally, let's have a look at the supports too then, and not too much has really changed here with only a few nerfs to Senna and Taric. In the S tier we have Janna, Leona, Lulu, Nami, Poppy, Rel, Senna and Thresh. Senna has been so strong for so long now, so we're going to keep her in the S tier for now despite her nerfs. Poppy continues to be a fantastic support to carry with in a ton of different drafts, and Lulu remains one of the strongest enchanters you can play too. If you're looking for a bit of an underrated enchanter to play though, you should consider giving Karma another try. She's just an incredibly strong 2v2 champion to play in the lane phase, with solid poke with mantra Qs, great CC to set up ganks with her W, and with shields and movement speed too, she's a great addition to any lane. Karma is one of those champions that is always useful no matter what, making her a great support to main because she's very rarely picked or banned either. Rakan has been creeping back up the tiers again, especially recently towards higher ranks. He's always been a very creative playmaking support, with the potential to carry or not really do too much depending on who's playing him. But if you are good enough to pull him off consistently, you have fantastic CC and engage and initiation for your team, whether it's as early as setting up ganks for your jungler or landing a 5-man ult into knock-up combo in the late game. Braum is yet another underrated support you can play. He works with so many different AD carries, especially those that can proc his passive easily, like Ezreal or Lucian. Or even if you've got a cheesy Yasuo pick in the bot lane, Braum Yasuo is absolutely bonkers to play. Braum's passive also makes him one of the best skirmishing champions in the game early on, whether that's invading at level 1 or fighting over early dragons. Apply that passive to as many people as possible, stun them all down, knock them all up with your ultimate, and block tons of damage with your shield. GG support diff. Another support carry champion to not forget about is Pyke. Now he's not in the S tier, he's still sitting in the A tier, but that mainly comes down to the matchups and drafts that you can play him in, and also the player that's actually piloting him, because a good Pyke can carry literally any game. He's got great early all-in potential with those flashies and early hooks, but in those late game team fights where you can clean up and get easy pentakills with your ultimate, there's really not too many better champions to flex with. One other support we also wanted to mention quickly is Lux. Now most of the time when you see a Lux support you won't be filled with confidence because you think it's probably just an off-road mid lane mage player playing in your bot lane instead. But actually when you take a bit of a closer look and understand how good she can actually be in the right hands here, then you might just be surprised at how effective she can be. The main thing to do when you're playing support Lux is to manage your poke without getting caught. You are exceptionally squishy, and if you miss your Q and allow your enemies to engage, you'll be an easy kill. But if you space correctly and land those E's and empowered autos and lock down enemies with your Qs when your jungler is around, she can actually be a much better support pick than you might think. So give her a go if you need a bit of AP. And that's going to bring us to the end of our quick predictions for patch 14.21. Don't forget that we'll be back with an updated tier list soon to cover all the champions affected and see who the biggest winners and losers were. Thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.